Okay, so we're live.
Okay. So this is Steve Zeltzer. I'm a staff member at KPFA. I formerly had a program called Work Week, which was removed from the air in January, but I am still a staff member. And I'm with, maybe the other people can introduce themselves.
I'm Alex Steinberg. I'm a listener representative from WBAI on the Pacifica National Board, and I'm currently the pro tem chair of the Pacifica National Board.
And I'm Polina Vasiliev. I'm a volunteer programmer at KPFK 90.7 FM in Los Angeles. I co-host, and co-produce a Spanish language show, Suplemento Comunitario. I am a current local station board member at KPFK, and I have been elected as a Pacifica National Board Director, but not yet seated due to the situation that we're going through.
Okay, well, thanks. I'm glad we could have this discussion. So I think maybe each of us can give an overview of what's been happening. There is a national election, which is, in my view, very critical about the future of Pacifica, that would change the bylaws to basically eliminate the local station boards, that would prevent the staff from having any representation on the Pacifica board, would raise the amount of money to become a member to $50, from $25 to $50, and allow changes that are not now possible, such as the sale of a station or a signal without any real, in my view, discussion. And what, in my view, has been happening at KPFA is that there's been a management in charge which basically doesn't even report to the local station boards, which it should, and also has been putting in strict programming and removing local programming. Just this past week, Sonali Kohate her show was put on, knocking out local programmers at the station. There was no consultation. And one of the things that I think is critical is that we have a transparency and a democratic governance. And I feel that this restructuring would eliminate really any local control. And we can get into it later, but there are people who've been nominated to the Pacifica National Board who have no relationship with Pacifica, and I feel some of them could be very harmful to the functioning of Pacifica. So that's why I'm urging people to vote no on the bylaws.
Alex?
Yes, I agree with everything you just said, Steve, but I would also like to bring in a little political context. This move to force us to adopt these new bylaws is part and parcel of the corporatization of community radio throughout the country. It's corporatization, and at the same time, largely its disappearance, particularly from small cities and rural areas. We've seen particularly in the last decade, as the internet has taken over much of the communications traffic, a decline in radio listenership overall. Pacifica has, of course, been hit financially as a result of this trend, but we're not the only ones. We can name quite a few others. iHeartRadio, for instance, had to lay off 1,000 people just a couple of months ago. They are the largest holder of radio licenses in the country. They own something like 800 frequencies in the U.S. And as far as progressive or left media, I think we're about it at this point. Al Jazeera is gone, and whatever you thought about it, it was certainly a voice out of the mainstream. Air America is long gone. And again, whatever you thought about it, it was something a little bit different. We're still here, and the reason we're still here is because although we have fallen in hard financial times, we still have the support of the communities that we serve, and we articulate something that they can't find either in the mainstream media or on what's called public radio. Public radio, let's face it, is not a real alternative to the mainstream media. We saw that very clearly anytime there's a major confrontation in this country, such as the Iraq War, or now the coronavirus epidemic. NPR and those type of stations will always pass the buck along and will never fail to always fail to challenge the corporate state, the pharmaceutical industry in this case, the military-industrial complex. So we're still here, but there's obviously a move to rein us in, to make us look a lot more like an NPR station. And that's what these bylaws are all about. They will restructure us so that we lose local control over programming, so that we lose the diverse representation we have on both our local boards and our national board, and so that we lose the ability to actually elect our governance structure, because those people who will be controlling the new national board will be appointed, and they will get to appoint their own replacements. In fact, they are already appointed. There are 6 at-large directors that are actually named in this referendum, and if this referendum, Zeus forbid, happens to pass, they will be our lords and masters they will be the sole authority in Pacifica for several months, until there are some elections from the stations. And even after elections from the station will only get to select 1 director from each station, and they will be always outvoted by the 6 at-large directors who are not answerable to anybody. So this is what we're up against, and it's a battle that has been waged over and over again in the history of Pacifica. I was reading something about the early years when Lou Hill founded Pacifica and founded KPFA, and he was waging the same kind of a battle in his day against the corresponding people who wanted to have a more mainstream kind of outlook and a more mainstream kind of fundraising model for KPFA. So it's nothing new, but it comes at a critical time politically, of course, when we're faced with a severe right-wing authoritarian regime in the form of the Trump administration, and the corporate wing of the Democratic Party that wants to return to the days of Hillary Clinton and Obama. And so here we are.
Meaning they want to lose to Trump?
Well, that's certainly what it looks like.
It certainly does. Thank you, Alex, for sharing your views, and I share them as well. Sorry, folks, for those of you who are watching us, if this sounds like a chorus that's in full agreement. It's not quite the case. Hopefully there'll be some discussion, and maybe instead of repeating the points that have already been made, I just wanted to add one thing, and then maybe ask you guys a question, ask for your opinion. Also, one of the striking elements of the new proposed rewritten bylaws is the fact that staff will be completely disenfranchised, or they will no longer be able to have any representation on the National Board of Directors. Now, this, in my opinion, is antithetical to what Pacifica has been. Historically, this radical experiment in community radio that is different from public radio, and that is giving staff, has given workers, those of us who produce its product, its content, a participation, the oversight over how things are run. Now, there are those who say, and I'm thinking we're all producers or staff, there are many paid staff and some volunteers who ask themselves, is this a radical move really perhaps the only thing that will save Pacifica from itself? Because there are those who say that we are not paying our bills, that we're in a horrible financial situation, and there's really no clear proposal as to how to come out of it. What say you to them?
Well, I think that first of all, KPFA has been adding staff at a time when the revenue is declining. So, and we've raised that. I've raised that at the local station board when I was a local station rep. Why are we adding to staff when our revenue is declining? And let's face it, we're going into a depression in this country right now. A world depression, not just in this country, but around the world. What is that going to mean to Pacifica and KPFA and the different stations? It's going to mean even less revenue. A radical financial crisis is going to hit everyone, including the listeners and supporters of Pacifica. So that means we're going to have to reduce staff, and they don't want to say that. In fact, they blame WBAI. They said that WBAI was bleeding Pacifica, but KPFA did not pay its property taxes for 6 years. And that's the responsibility of the KPFA management, Quincy McCoy and the business manager. So I think that there's a problem of financial transparency with the people who are pushing these bylaws, corporate bylaws. But the other thing is, when we talk about transparency and financial responsibility, one of the nominees to the Pacifica board is a guy named Bob King. Now, Bob King was president of the UAW from 2010 to 2014.
The United Auto Workers Union?
Yeah, the United Auto Workers Union. At this time, there was massive corruption going on. It's a top-down corporate-type union, business union. So and believes in labor management partnerships. He, at a meeting at Berkeley that I was at, said that he was interested and concerned about the profitability of the auto companies. That was his concern, which I found rather interesting, since the union should be interested in the protection of the workers and not the profitability of the companies. In any event, Bob King was there when Hollifield, who was a vice president, and many of the present leaders were stealing money from the union, basically engaged in massive theft. And there's a 40-page indictment. Now, I was in a debate with Carol Travis, who is supporting these bylaws. In fact, she used to be a UAW official who pushed the same policies with concession bargaining, and she is probably the person that proposed Bob King as a Pacifica board member. Now, at that time, I said, listen, the top union leaders, virtually the entire leadership of the UAW, have been indicted, are going to jail, are in jail for corruption. And you were international president of the UAW. And so Carol had brought along the 40-page indictment. And she said, well, wait a minute, he wasn't indicted. He didn't steal any money. And I said, well, that's not really the point. The point is, he was president of the union when this was going on. You had a culture of corruption in the UAW. He did not call for a trial. He did not press charges for members that he knew, officers who were stealing money.
And he admitted to federal prosecutors that he knew about the corruption. He knew the people involved. He knew what they were doing. And he basically said he told them to stop.
Yeah, he told them to stop. So is this the kind of person that we want on the Pacifica board? Somebody who's mired in corruption, who knows what's going on, and now he's going to be on the Pacifica board? I don't feel any confidence that he's going to be in favor of transparency. He's going to conduct the financial affairs of Pacifica with any adherence to transparency, because he had a position as a responsibility for what was going on. He didn't do anything when he was president of the UAW. So the fact that Carol Travis was prepared to defend him by saying he didn't take money personally, so therefore he's a good candidate to be on the Pacifica board, raises a real question. Who are these people? Why would you propose somebody like that to be on this Pacifica board who nobody really knows about, particularly at KPFA?
And he was not indicted, is what we know, and we know that he cooperated with federal prosecutors. That's really all we know. We also know, speaking of the United Auto Workers Union, they were once a militant union, but that was like 70 years ago. They've since become I would say they would be the most corrupt union in the United States at this point, without any question. They have. Do you know what their total assets are? Their combined assets? That includes a big stock portfolio.
No idea.
Take a guess.
$700 million.
It's actually over $1 billion.
Over $1 billion, okay.
Over $1 billion. And I saw this, there was some statistics that came out from a few years ago, I think 2014 or 2015. They spent $67 million that year to finance their staff, meaning their operations, their bureaucrats, basically. And do you know how much money they used to pay for strike benefits for their workers? $2.3 million. So $67 million for staff, $2.3 million for the people who are paying your salaries. So that's the kind of organization he was in charge of. It's certainly about as far away from anything having to do with Pacifica's mission as one can imagine.
And the UAW has been a main proponent of the Democratic Party. They supported Biden. They supported Hillary Clinton, even though a lot of UAW members supported Sanders. And whether you support Sanders or not, there should be a democratic process by which union members, rank-and-file union members, can decide who they want. So we're bringing somebody on board, if they're successful, who has a history of supporting top-down corporate unionism. And that's what you have in the UAW. And that's what's being basically pushed at Pacifica and KPFA. And I think that would mean that our voices as an independent network would really be severely threatened.
Certainly.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that for those who are staff currently at any Pacifica radio station, you should ask yourselves, right? What's going to happen? Why are we made to believe that by bringing in a group of corporatist professionals, and I'm using air quotes here, that's going to benefit us? How do you know you're going to keep your job? How can you even imagine that things will get better for you as somebody who works and contributes to it, right? As George Galloway likes to say on his show, former MP George Galloway in Britain, if you believe that, then I have a bridge somewhere in London, very nice bridge that I can sell you, right?
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is that I've been pushing for is we have to increase our listenership, our viewership, particularly among young people. And most people in the Bay Area, even the staff members who are supporting the bylaw change, admit that most young people don't even know about KPFA. Now, we've been trying in the Bay Area to have live streaming at climate rallies, at labor demonstrations, May Day,
yes,
and to partner with the community and use these live streams on a channel, and Pacifica and the stations can use that to bring the voices of young people, bring the voices of working people, of immigrants to the airwaves. And we've been met with one roadblock after another at KPFA because they want to control the content. That's really what it is. And they believe only paid staff people should be doing this work. That's what they've said. And this is an impediment to the kind of programming that we need to do, which can't be done with paid staff. We're a poor network. We have more resources than most other community stations. But we have to use the unpaid staff. We have to use young people to start having a lot of exciting programming. We could have at KPFA 2 additional digital channels if we digitized our channels. That would allow for new programs. Instead, they're throwing programs off. The other thing I want to add is the corporatization of the news at KPFA. The news department gets most of the funds at KPFA, and they've merged the news of Los Angeles and San Francisco. Well, that doesn't serve the people of Los Angeles or San Francisco. San Francisco Bay Area has 12 million people. We need an hour of news from people in the Bay Area and the peninsula and all over the Bay Area, and the same for Los Angeles, an hour for news. So I'm against this, one news for all of California. I'm not against a California news show, but one of the things that we can provide is we can provide local news, hard-hitting news in a local area that will attract people, that you're not going to get on NPR, you're not going to get on corporate media. And I think that's something we should do.
And those local news need to be on not just the drive time, but there needs to be a news minute or a brief segment at the top of the hour, just like commercial stations tend to do. We have to offer something different, something exciting.
I wanted also to get back to something Polina brought up earlier, and that's the accusation against us, those of us who are defending the democratic governance structure we have, that we don't have any viable financial plan, where we have no plan to pay off the loan, for instance, and that if this current governance structure continues for another day, a disaster is going to befall Pacifica. I've pointed out that this kind of talk, this doom and gloom kind of talk, is simply playing on people's fears and panic mongering. And that's it's something that Naomi Klein pointed out in a book she wrote over 10 years ago called the Disaster Capitalism.
Shock Doctrine.
The Shock Doctrine, in which what you do is you shock people with some great disaster, and you tell them that leave it up to us to fix this, and unless you leave it up to us, things are going to get much, much worse. So that's that's kind of the lament we've been hearing. Now, it is true that we have financial problems. Nobody's denying that, but we're not about to go under. We do have, as a matter of fact, a plan to pay off the loan. That plan consists of raising some money from bequests that we do get regularly to go toward the principal, conducting some very crucial, well-directed national fund drives that can help in that respect. And whatever the remainder will be, we can renegotiate that remainder of the principal. Some of the folks that we've been talking about, they seem to feel that renegotiating the loan is something like committing an original sin or something, but it's actually something that businesses do all the time. I see no reason why we can't do that, especially now that the loan rates have been cut to practically zero, which is maybe one silver lining in this horrible situation that we're facing with this pandemic. But anyway, so it's not true that we have no plan to pay off the loan. It's not true that we're about to go under. And furthermore, it's a real stretch to say that our financial problems are due to the governance structure that we have. That's complete and utter nonsense. Yes, we have sometimes contentious local station board meetings. That's absolutely true. And it would certainly be better if we conducted more civil meetings and so on. But I think there's no parliamentary body on this planet that doesn't have some form of contentious meetings. This is what happens when people have different ideas, and sometimes they're very passionate about those ideas.
Democracy is messy.
Yeah, I mean, it is messy. And we could certainly do better in that respect. But the answer to that, of course, is not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. You don't abandon democracy because it's messy, and sometimes people are contentious and maybe yell at each other at a local meeting or something. You have to. Those local boards are important because they do require some accountability on the part of local management to the listeners. It's really the only avenue they have. What's being proposed in the new bylaws as an alternative is to have community advisory boards, which we have those as well. As a matter of fact, it's a requirement for CPB funding that we hope to get back someday. But the community advisory boards have no governance function whatsoever. They are exactly what they're called, advisory boards. And I know in the NPR world, that's pretty much what you have. And they're basically just rubber stamps for whatever management wants to do. And sometimes they put on a dog and pony show for local management.
Well, in the Bay Area, the Community Advisory Board has suggested we do more multimedia, more live programming. They did a survey of the listeners, and the management has just rejected that. That's the Quincy management. with the support of the majority of the local station board, have just rejected that. So I think actually Pacifica now can play and must play a critical role in challenging this crisis that we're in. We're going into a world depression, a depression in this country. We have an epidemic in which they want to put the drug companies in charge and the pharmaceutical companies in charge of developing, a antidote. They want to give trillions to the banks. They're not talking about nationalizing the healthcare industry so everyone can have healthcare. They're not talking about a freeze on evictions nationally so people aren't going to be kicked out of their home. We're going into a very radical situation in this country. And frankly, Pacifica can provide a vehicle of voices of working people, and there are going to be millions of people laid off. People have to confront the fact that we're facing a global economic collapse, that tens of millions of people are going to be laid off. The airlines are shut down. And that is going to be devastating to the working people of this country. It's not going to be solved by the politicians. It's not going to be solved by this Congress. It has to be solved by working people. Now, Pacifica can play a critical role in giving voice to working people and organizing for working people to organize and defend themselves. Because right now in San Francisco, where we're having this, for me, we're under a quarantine. We can't leave our homes. People are being laid off, construction workers, carpenters. Things are being shut down. You can't get your car repaired. And this could go on for months. So we're talking about a very radical situation, which I, in my lifetime, have never seen. Now, we need a voice that is not a top-down, corporate-controlled machine, which is what they would bring about through these bylaws. In fact, we're spending more money on fighting lawyers, these lawyers that have been suing the corporation, which is actually a tactic, a corporate tactic. You have lawyers sue a foundation or a corporation to drain it of funds. These funds should be going into the station. So it should be going into programming and that kind of thing. Instead, KPFA and Pacifica are spending money fighting these lawsuits, which these people seem to have a lot of money to have, lawsuits against Pacifica and the stations. Lastly, I want to talk about union busting, because when KPFA was taken over in 1990, they shut down the station, kicked people out, and put on pipe music, much like they want to have now with Pacifica Across America, which was piped into WBAI. But what happened in New York was outrageous. Quincy and the executive director, Crozier, and supported by Sabrina Jacobs, had armed guards go and shut down that station in the middle of a fund drive. That is union busting. The union was not informed. The local station board was not informed. That's a union busting attack.
And the national board was not informed either.
Who?
The national board.
The national board.
The national board was not informed either. So this was against a violation of the bylaws. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, if they did something illegal, maybe they should be pressed with criminal.
It was a violation of the law, not only the bylaws.
That's right. So they busted up, shut down the station, took equipment out of the station, and they say that that's professionalism. Now, it didn't work out. It was a bungled shutdown, a bungled illegal shutdown of WBAI. But these are the tactics of the same people who are pushing these corporate bylaws. So they want to say, we did this in WBA and we want to do it other places, and here are the bylaws you should give us to approve that. And that's going to solve our problem by closing down WBAI. I think we need to defend WBAI. We need to defend all the stations and really build up our listenership, have more exciting programming, go into the community and get the voices out. That'll get a tremendous audience right now.
Absolutely. We're in desperate times, but very exciting times. It's times of upheaval and crisis where grassroots organizing is really what is going to be make or break. And here's my question. Now, basically, when you talk about the NPR model or the public radio model, the programming tends to be centrist because and not very diverse at all in terms of voices, because that's where the money is, right? So if we are fully listener supported and if we want to avoid a major underwriting, right, or look for those elusive big donors, how do we really find the fine balance between having radio produced by and for the marginalized communities and attract that massive support that Pacifica used to have, say, for instance, in the times of in the early 2000s, right, when we were on the streets covering the protests against the Sensenbrenner bill that would seek to criminalize immigrants and those who would help them, right? And I'm thinking here as well of Spanish language programming, which is very prominent on at KPFK and still always under threat, right? Because we're all volunteers, and obviously our content doesn't get promoted as much as some of the Sonalis of the world. So yeah, just to land, as we say, para aterrizar.
Well, Pacifica could have a national Spanish channel.
Oh.
That's what I think we should have, a national Spanish channel with programmers around the country providing program to that channel. Pacifica should have a national labor channel with regular labor reports together. We could have a national labor channel. Pacifica could do that with the thing we have now, but it can't be. Basically, there are people who do not want that to happen. In fact, the only labor show at KPFA, Work Week, was taken off by this manager. He said we wanted to go in a new direction, and they put on Sonali's programming, knocking not only Work Week, but other local programs off. So why do we have to hear Sonali? They also put on a show, Our Call, Your Call, from a NPR station in San Francisco, which is already on, and they put it on KPFA. So these are corporate-type management decisions. There's a book, as a matter of fact, that Quincy has written called On Static. That's his book, Quincy, and it's a corporate
Quincy
agenda.
Is the general manager of KPFA in Berkeley.
Quincy McCoy, and it's lauded by CEO of Radio One. You know, it's lauded by entertainment news wires about how to increase your listenership. Actually, the fact is Quincy has promised he was going to bring big money into KPFA if he was manager. It hasn't happened, so he did not carry out what he promised. And secondly, the membership of KPFA has dropped from 16,000 to about 13,000. So 13,000 in the latest amount. So why is that?
That's in the last couple of years, but actually
that's in the last couple of years. So I mean, these people are not taking responsibility for what they've done. Not Pacifica.
If you go back a little bit further, 15 years ago, KPFA had 33,000 members. Today it's down to 12.
In this period, in the Bay Area, there are 12 million people. There's struggles going on every day, and we only have 12,000 members. That means, it seems to me, that the programming they're putting out is not programming that's attracting people. And the news get the least amount of funding, actually.
I think it's time, particularly the KPFA and KPFK, it's time we took a real a look at both the programming content and the staff. I do believe that the staff is heavily overloaded at both of those stations. Their staff are literally 10 times the size of the staff at WBAI, and as far as I can see, their programming is no better. And I'll go on the record and say that. Yes, they do have some good programming. I'm not saying they don't, but it could be better. But they've also lost their edge. They've lost close communication with the communities they're supposed to serve. Let me give you some of my ideas, and these are just my own ideas. I haven't discussed them on the national board particularly. I would like to see Pacifica act as a network with an anchor news program that goes out on all the stations and the affiliates, fulfilling kind of the role that Democracy Now! Used to fulfill when it was part of Pacifica. It no longer is. It's autonomous now. And at the same time, have plenty of local programming at the stations. I think one could reinforce the other. And I think we also have to, as you say, Steve, we have to be multimedia conscious these days. We have to partner with other media organizations. And that's how we're going to break through the bottleneck of having this radio media, which by itself isn't not going away, but it's certainly in decline compared to other communications media. So,
when there was a march,
that's what I would like to see.
A march in New York of 2 million people protesting the death of Eric Garner.
Yes.
and there was a streamer, a blogger, a streamer. He was streaming it live, and you got 2 million hits. There could have been journalists from WBAI covering that march, interviewing people, why they were marching, what the issues were. When there were Nazis demonstrating 2 blocks from KPFA, they were rallying, and there was an anti-Nazi march of thousands of people, young people who were protesting the Nazis. KPFA could have been live there, broadcasting and streaming. In fact, ABC and NBC in the Bay Area, they were streaming it live, but KPFA was MIA. Now, young people want to hear what is going on in their voices, and KPFA could be a vehicle. As a matter of fact, in the 60s, when KPFA had its greatest audience, they live taped Sproul Hall, Mario Savio live from UC during the free speech movement. That was in the 60s, and yet they refuse to do that today. Why aren't we covering live events? That's what excites our audience. That's what people want to hear. The live struggles that are going on for working people, for immigrants, for unions. These are the real struggles that people want to hear, and we can have them on live. And that will get a tremendous audience and a response. People don't know about KPFA because KPFA is not relevant to their lives. And young people look at their cell phone. They want live content on their cell phone. They want video. If we're not providing that, we're not going to get the audience of a large number of young people.
Well, here we are providing video of these 3 older, boring people. Well, jokes apart, would you support a national school of broadcasting or something of that to that effect? I'm thinking how to bring in young people who want the experience of working for a national, radio foundation, getting the skills, getting that experience, going out there, using social media, but also supported by people who have been doing this for some time, and and I think that this idea somehow is just not taking off. Why do you think?
I don't know, but it's part of the Pacifica mission.
Yep.
I mean, education is an integral part of the Pacifica mission, and that's something that's often forgotten. One of the in an early statement that Blue Hill made, he said that one of the functions of the kind of radio station he wanted to have was to have a community space where people can go and perform live music.
Yeah.
Things like that. And it doesn't have to be a celebrity who does it. So it should be an avenue for young people to learn and to develop their skills, and you could have a kind of an apprenticeship where you go on the internet first and on HD radio, and then maybe if you really get to the higher ranks of your skills, then you can get onto broadcast radio at the same time as you're being live streamed, and things like that can happen. All it takes is some imagination and a willingness to go against the screen, and unfortunately that seems to be lacking on the part of some of our management.
Well, we do have a YouTube channel at Pacifica, and I've been doing work with the dock workers, for example. The Princess Hotel, the contaminated ship. They wanted to unload the contaminated cargo on the ports, on the docks of Oakland, truck it through Oakland. Longshoreman ILW had a stoppage. They also would not let the crew off the ship. They're in the middle of the day right now. I mean, this is a national story. You have a contaminated ship. The crewmen are stuck on the ship. So this could be live on a YouTube channel. We want to do that, and we want to get it out so people see Pacifica as a relevant broadcast vehicle, and it's something we can do. And young people are putting all kinds of things on. So I think we got to develop these channels and move ahead and really make Pacifica and the stations what they should be, so we can get the audiences and the support we need.
And I don't think it's going to be with less democracy that we're going to reach that goal that you were talking about, Steve.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's, I don't know, people sometimes forget, but there are a lot of people in this country, many of whom voted for Mr. Trump.
Yes.
Who are completely, in effect, they're completely disenfranchised. They have nobody speaking for them, and the reason many of these people voted for Mr. Trump was because they were so thoroughly disgusted at the Democratic Party establishment, which to them represents war, social inequality, and
Yes.
just neglect of the working class and neglect of minorities. And of course, what they got with Trump was all that and even more. But the reason these people still are, supporting Trump instead of the corporate Democrats is this huge sense of resentment that they've been left out. They have no voice. Why don't we provide a voice for these people, and why do we have to let the right wing Fox News and those people give them a voice? Which
well, this past Sunday on KPFA, the Sunday morning show, what do we have on? We have Philip Mulderry with Bill Fletcher arguing that it's the Biden. We got to get on the Biden bandwagon. The Biden
that doesn't surprise me.
This is, but I mean, the idea that Biden is going to solve the problem for the people of America, and that's being put on the Sunday morning show. That's the only news show on Sunday. That's what's being put out to the KPFA audience. So these are the problems that we have politically. I mean, there is not another voice against, on KPFA and on Pacifica. We could have a national debate, really, on what's going on. What is the future? And this time we're in right now is going to be a life and death time for the world, not just for the United States, for the world, with the global climate, with the collapsing economic crisis, and with this pandemic in which we have a collapsed public health system, in which people are afraid to go out. There's no antidote, and people are on your own. There's no national health care. So these are distressing times and terrible times for people. But these are the kind of times that Pacifica and the stations need to reach out and build an audience and answer these questions. How are people going to solve their problems? And that's what Pacifica and our stations can do. We can have the voices out of what we can do to solve these problems.
Great. Let's tell folks what's going on finally, or repeat the deadline to get your ballot if you are a member of Pacifica Radio, and that means if you are listening or watching us from any signal area, be it KPFA Berkeley, KPFK Los Angeles, WBAI New York, WPFW in Washington, D.C., or KPFT in Houston, if you have contributed at least $25 during the past year, you are a member of Pacifica. If you gave us $50, then you and a significant other or household member, have the right to vote both. And we have this referendum on these new proposed bylaws that seeks to change radically what Pacifica is and how it's governed. And the deadline to request a ballot.
It's Thursday at 9 o'clock, I think.
It's actually Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, if I'm not mistaken.
Eastern. Okay.
And so that would be 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We might be off by an hour, but I believe that's the final information that we have. And then votes. Your ballot needs to be received by midnight, 11:59 Eastern Standard Time. This same Thursday, the 19th, that would be 8:59 Pacific time, 11 Eastern, and the information about how to still request your ballot, if you haven't received your ballot, it could be in your spam folder. It could be that Pacifica doesn't have the right email address for you, but if you are a listener and you've contributed as a donor to the station in the past year, you should have received either a paper ballot or postcard or an email. If you haven't received one, then please go to elections.pacifica.org and click on the first link at the top that will tell you how to request an electronic ballot at this point, so you would vote online. And let's see what else. If you contribute to a show on any of our sister stations, and if you have if you have volunteered at least 30 hours in the last 3 months, I think that would be the months of October, November, and December, then you also have the right to vote. And in
Well,
this
that's
case,
for
right?
staff.
Yeah, that's for staff,
Listeners
right? For
only have
staff,
to
yeah. But I wanted to
contribute
mention the
3
staff
hours.
situation as well. It's
That's right.
important because a lot of staff might not be aware of the fact that they are members of the foundation with the right to vote. So, listeners, everybody, listeners, staff, go to elections.pacifica.org. If you're part of a collective, if you help produce a show, if you've done research, if you've been, I don't know, doing line producing, coordination, and you've done a certain number of hours, then you have the right to also to vote in this future of Pacifica. So get in touch with your folks, folks that you collaborate with, and find out how you can still exercise that right.
And this may be the last election.
Yes.
This may be the last election. So I think people have to wake up at Pacifica. This is a chance to keep the right to have an election. If these bylaws change, they could change that. So that's...
It will also mean we just had an election, actually. Everybody who are members of Pacifica who voted elected delegates for the 2020, who will in turn elect directors to the Pacifica National Board. If this bylaws referendum passes, it means your vote for delegates in the election that we just had meant nothing. It would be
disenfranchised.
It would be invalidated.
It just disenfranchised your vote. So we've got to protect our votes. And you can find out more at pacificafightback.org.
We have a lot of information on pacificafightback.org where you can also see who else is voting no on these bylaws.
Including Danny Glover.
No? Including Danny Glover, Abby Martin,
Sandy
Sheehan, exactly. Code Pink, Medea Benjamin, and many, many others. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank all of you for watching us, and thanks to my two co-hosts, really, commentators, for joining us. And we hope to see you again. We hope we can have more discussions and debates. This is something Pacifica should be having. This is something the stations should be having. We had only one debate at KPFA, and people can't even find that. So why shouldn't there be more publicity about the debates, the issues, the discussions? That's what we need, more democracy. Let the air in.
That's right. And let's maybe leave folks with the following tantalizing idea. Maybe we should also have national broadcasts and national collaborations. Now we're just representing 3 stations, but it could be all of our stations and affiliates. Working on the national, on the issues that are really important, collaborating, contributing from the perspective that we each bring in locally, and bring in more folks, more voices, more diversity, not less.
Definitely. Well, thank you all, and
thank you.
I hope you vote.
Please vote.
Definitely vote no to save this network. Thank you.
Thank you.
No pasaran.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.